You're listening to Trace Hunt Radio. We explore the darkest chapters of true crime, unsolved mysteries, cold cases, and the twisted minds behind them. Follow the blood, chase the clues, uncover the truth. Stay sharp, the hunt begins now.
Hidden here in the hay.
January 1940 finds Blackwood Hills under a slate-gray sky. Its forests silent except for the distant echo of wartime sirens. At the ridge's crest sits Winter Hollow Farm, abandoned and frostbound. Its stone walls streaked with soot and the remnants of hurried departures. Edmund Hawthorne's family, his wife Margaret, their son William, William's wife Clara, and the two grandchildren, Alice and Thomas, once called this place home. Now only whispers fill the air. Detective Inspector Malcolm Reeves arrives by bicycle at dusk, the wind nipping at his coat as he dismounts beside the rusted gate. A single lantern hangs from its bent iron post, its flame flickering weakly against the gathering gloom. Reeves notes the drifts of snow, largely unbroken save for a peculiar set of small, bare footprints that lead from the road to the barn door and vanish there, as though the wearer stepped through an unseen portal. The farmhouse is silent. Smoke no longer curls from its chimney, and the curtained windows give nothing away. Reeves pushes open the kitchen door, which creaks on its hinges, revealing a scene suspended in time. A kettle sits atop a cold stove, its spout rimmed with frost. A teacup lies shattered on the flagstone floor, porcelain shards glittering like ice. Chairs stand neatly arranged around a table, as if awaiting a late supper that never arrived. On the mantel, a grandfather clock stands frozen at 8:17 p.m., its pendulum still. Portraits line the walls, Edmund in his tailored jacket, stern and resolute. Margaret poised with knitting needles, William and Clara arm in arm. Alice and Thomas playing at their parents' feet. Reeves studies their faces, imagining laughter once echoing through these rooms. A sudden draft makes him draw his coat tighter. He turns and crosses into the narrow corridor. A bedroom door, carved with childish scrawl, Alice Thomas, stands slightly ajar. Inside, a single cot is draped in a handcrafted blanket. A toy wooden soldier, chipped and paint faded, stands sentinel on a windowsill, its unblinking gaze fixed on the fields beyond. Reeves notes a fine layer of snow dusting the floorboards, yet no footprints mark the path in or out. Reeves moves to Edmund's study. The desk is strewn with papers, letters, receipts, and the charred remnants of a note in Margaret's handwriting. The fragment reads, "If only someone would hear our cry." Embers of ash cling to the parchment's edge. Reeves pinches a corner, smelling burnt paper and something faintly sweet, like smoldering cedar. He sketches the words in his notebook before tucking the ashes into an evidence pouch. Crossing the room, Reeves approaches a large window overlooking the barnyard. Through frosted glass, he sees the hulking barn door, slightly open. Horses' troughs lie empty and choked with iced barley. Beyond, the skeletal remains of last year's wheat stubble lean under the weight of crusted snow. He recalls the footprints, 6 pairs of small, bare imprints, tracing an arc to the barn, but disappearing at its threshold. Stepping back into the gathering dusk, Reeves lights his lantern and proceeds to the barn. The threshold yaws darkly before him. Inside, the air smells of stale straw mixed with iron. His boot sinks in old hay, releasing a faint rasp. He sweeps his torch upward, catching rafters streaked with soot and cobwebs. The loft's hatch stands ajar. He climbs the ladder, each rung groaning under his weight. In the loft, he discovers 6 mounds of hay arranged in a semicircle. At first glance, they resemble sleeping bodies until he notices the dark stains that outline each form. Cautiously, he brushes aside the top layer of straw on the first mound. Beneath, the shawl Margaret Hawthorne once wore emerges, its wool darkened. Reeves's breath catches as he uncovers the necks, a small jacket Alice favored, its sleeves twisted. The third reveals William's coat, buttons frozen mid-fastening. One by one, each covering yields a grim truth. The bodies of 6 members of the Hawthorne family, concealed beneath hay as though hidden from an unwelcome world. A hammerhead, marble white and slick with aged blood, lies half buried in straw. Reeves picks it up gingerly, noting the handle snapped away. He turns it over in gloved hands, tallying the precise, surgical blows indicated by the fractures. There is no room for error or hesitation, each strike, delivered with grim certainty. On the loft floor beside the hatch are the bare footprints, their delicate toes splayed and pressed deep into the straw. They lead from the hatch opening and stop abruptly at the first hay mound. No exit tracks exist. Whoever entered left no trace of departure. Reeves lowers his torch. Mind racing, he photographs each detail: footprints, hammer, straw mounds, fragments of clothing for his report. Descending back to ground level, Reeves secures the barn door before investigating the exterior. Snow surrounds the structure, pristine except for those 6 prints. He measures their depth, noting that the wearer must have been light and cautious, as though stepping on eggshells. He follows the trail to where it ends, crouches, and brushes aside snow. Only a few blades of wheat, pressed flat, mark the spot. The night air grows colder as Reeves returns to the farmhouse. His lanterns glow, flickering against its walls. Inside, he places the hammerhead and clothing fragments into evidence bags. The cooker still holds the cold stew. The ledger with its shopping list lies open, its final entry dated January 12th. Reeves traces the words with a gloved fingertip: flour, salt, candles, 5 pints of milk. Daily necessities for a family seemingly at peace. Outside, the wind picks up, rattling shutters and sending a shiver down Reeves's spine. Behind him, the barn looms like an open coffin, 6 lives laid to rest beneath layers of straw. Somewhere beyond the tree line, unseen, a presence stirs, crushing snow underfoot before it vanishes into the dark. Reeves stands still, lantern aloft, taking in the scene. The frozen farmhouse, the deserted barn, the silent fields. He makes a final notation in his notebook. 6 victims discovered. Concealed under hay, no apparent struggle. Bare footprints lead inward only. Missing persons. Report pending confirmation of identities. Official forensic team arrive at first light. He secures his bicycle at the road's edge and mounts it, lantern in hand. As he pedals away, he glances back once more. Winter Hollow Farm recedes into the snowy landscape, its secret intact until dawn's first light will bring more questions than answers. At first light, a pale dawn slips across Winter Hollow Farm, revealing the frostbound tableau in sharper detail. Detective Inspector Malcolm Reeves returns with Sergeant Helen Carter and the regional forensic team, led by Dr. Philip Palmer. They enter the barn under a gray sky, the lantern flicker of last night replaced by the steady beams of flashlights and portable floodlights. The air smells of damp straw and something fouler, iron tang mingled with rot. Drive-dat Palmer kneels by the first hay mound, his gloved hands moving with deliberate care. He notes the angle of the blade wounds on the fabric, precise, measured, delivered with unerring force. Palmer's assistant, Constable Davies, photographs each layer of straw as it is peeled back, revealing bodies still clad in fragments of the Hawthorne family's everyday clothes. A blood-stained shawl, a child's wear-upon jumper, Edmund's heavy wool coat. Each garment tells a story of interrupted life. Reeves moves to the second mound, where Margaret Hawthorne lies curled as if in repose. Her knitting needles, snapped in two, rest beside her, points the same diameter as the holes in her skull. Carter examines the scattered eggshells near the feeding trough. Shattered and crusted, they suggest breakfast preparations abandoned mid-task. No footprints mar the area around the trough. The killer left no sign of entry beyond those 6 bare prints discovered yesterday. Outside the barn, Palmer directs to technicians collecting soil samples and traces of hair caught in cobwebs. A faint circle of crushed barley surrounds the building's perimeter, betraying the path of some heavy object dragged through the snow. Reeves notes wooden splinters wedged in the barn door frame, likely from forced entry or someone prying open a latch. He jots down each detail, aware that any overlooked clue could be the one that cracks the case. Back inside, Carter uncovers a ledger tucked beneath a loose floorboard. Its pages detail the farm's meager income and growing debts, eggs sold for pennies. Livestock purchases noted. Alongside rising prices, Edmund's handwriting, tight and controlled, reveals a man under stress. The last entry, January 11th, reads simply, "Need feed by week's end." No hint of impending doom, only the steady grind of survival. Reeves takes the ledger into evidence, pondering the possibility that financial desperation played a role. As they work, villagers gather at a respectful distance beyond the yellow cordon tape. Among them is Gustav Klein, the local blacksmith, whose broad shoulders and soot-streaked apron mark him as a man accustomed to hard labor. Reeves approaches him gently. "Mr. Klein," Reeves begins, "you knew the Hawthornes, I understand." Klein nods, shifting his weight uneasily. "Edmund once fixed my plow. Good man, solid as oak." He glances toward the barn. "Strange things started weeks before. I heard children's laughter at night, when there should be none. My mare got spooked by rustling in the loft, but no footprints led away." Carter steps forward. "You saw footprints yourself?" "Aye," Klein says. "Footprints small and bare led into the barn, but vanished. I thought it a trick of the wind, but now I know it was something darker." Reeves thanks him and turns to Dr. Palmer, who is examining a child's boot, oddly intact despite the rest of Thomas's jacket being blood-soaked. "These boots," Palmer murmurs, "appear new, not like those Thomas would wear. Someone brought them here recently." Sergeant Carter examines a scrap of paper pinned beneath a nail in the wall. It bears a torn fragment of a letter. The debt remains unpaid, scrawled in firm, unfamiliar script. Reeves holds it up to the light. The ink is smudged and old, but the thread is clear. He stows it in an evidence bag. By mid-morning, the barn is methodically emptied of bodies and belongings. Reeves watches as each sack of straw and clothing is cataloged. Outside, the forensic team sets up a portable tent to process evidence. The hammerhead, footprints cast in plaster, soil samples, and that ominous patch of yellowish fluid found near the 6th grave. Preliminary tests indicate it is not bodily fluid, but a chemical solvent of some kind, a compound used to strip paint or dissolve animal fats. Reeves files that detail away for Dr. Palmer's deeper analysis. As the sun climbs, Reeves and Carter head to the farmhouse to interview the first witness, Carl Berger, the drifter who sought shelter days before the murders. Berger is cramped in the small kitchen, hands bound by rope, eyes hollow. His coat is indeed caked in dark mud that matches the soil around the barn, but he insists he left the farm on January 12th, 2 days before the last ledger entry. "I only asked for food," Berger says, voice low and raspy. "They turned me away, said they had little to spare." He gestures toward the window. "I walked off in the dark and never saw the place again until I heard the news." Carter watches his face for signs of deception. Berger's gaze shifts restlessly. Reeves notes his hands are rough, but his fingernails are clean, no evidence of recent violence. He thanks Berger and escorts him outside to be held for further questioning once the forensic reports arrive. Next, Reeves speaks with Frau Koch, whose letter summoned him. She stands at the edge of her flower bed, clutching a wear-upon scarf. "I heard them," she says quietly. "Voices and footsteps in the night, but there was no one there. I thought it was the war, maybe. Children playing." Her eyes fill with tears. "I shouldn't have ignored it." Reeves offers comfort. "You did the right thing by writing." He notes how her scarf matches the wool of Margaret's stolen shawl, though Mrs. Koch claims she lent it months ago and never saw it again. Another link is forged in the chain of suspicion. By afternoon, Dr. Palmer presents preliminary findings in the farmhouse parlor. He lays out samples, hair, staining on clothing, bits of chemical solvent. The blunt force trauma is consistent. Across all 6 victims, he explains, each blow delivered with anatomical precision suggesting either practice or chilling calm. The solvent suggests someone attempted to remove evidence perhaps. Blood or fingerprints from wood or tools. Reeves asks about the footprints. Palmer holds up a cast. The toes are splayed as though gripping the ground, the arch shallow indicating a barefoot child or someone mimicking such prints. "Not natural," Palmer says. "Likely staged." Reeves leans forward. "Staged to mislead." Palmer nods. "Indeed. We will test the solvent further." But this was no random killing. It was planned, and the barn served as a makeshift grave. As dusk falls again, Reeves reviews the day's findings. 6 victims hidden beneath hay, footprints deliberately planted, chemical solvents to mask evidence, a threatening letter, and a motley group of suspects, a drifter, a neighbor with a misplaced shawl, and whispers of financial ruin. He stands at the barn door, lantern in hand, and calls out softly, as though addressing the ghosts of Winter Hollow. "Who are you? And why did you leave only those bare footprints? As if to vanish from your own sin." Silence answers. Only the wind shifts the snow. As snow continues to drift across the fields, the investigation shifts focus from the physical evidence to the whispers and warnings that have long stalked Winter Hollow Farm. Detective Inspector Malcolm Reeves convenes a meeting in the ruined farmhouse parlor, its wallpaper peeling in curling ridges, to review local lore and newly discovered documents. By his side, Sergeant Helen Carter arranges the collected affidavits, letters, and witness statements on a folding table, while Dr. Philip Palmer lays out the chemical analysis and autopsy summaries. Reeves begins the session in a low, measured tone. "We know the how. Now we must learn the why." He spreads a fragile, yellowed letter before them. The heading reads, "To whom it may concern," signed only as a friend of Winter Hollow. The letter speaks of a century-old tragedy. In 1842, a man accused of witchcraft was dragged from this very farm and executed, his body burned on a pyre beyond the barn. Villagers believed his death would cleanse the land of evil. The letter's author warns that failure to honor the old graves and perform a cleansing ritual in 1942 would awaken the suffering spirit and demand blood in retribution. Carter picks up the letter, brow furrowed. This suggests a cult or at least someone steeped in superstition planned these murders as a ritual. Palmer crosses his arms. The precision of the killings indicates the perpetrator had anatomical knowledge, not folk superstition, but they could have used local beliefs to mask their motives. Reeves nods. "We need to separate myth from motive." He turns to a new document, the partial shopping list from Edmund's ledger. Beneath the groceries scrawled in careful script, a faint ghost of pencil marks reveals an erased line, "Candles for midnight." Reeves traces the impression with a gloved finger. Margaret must have planned a vigil or ritual late that night. Carter interjects, "A vigil against the old curse, perhaps." Reeves studies her, or a ploy by someone who knew she'd write that list. Outside, villagers gather at the gate under an overcast sky. Reeves and Carter step into the courtyard to interview 3 key witnesses: Gustav Klein the blacksmith, Frau Koch the neighbor, and Friedrich Keller the farmhand, who claimed to see odd lights in the loft. Klein, his hands stained with soot, stands first. "I heard Margaret singing in the barn loft on the night of January 12th, he says. "A hymn my grandmother taught me, protect us from the shadows." He shivers, recalling the memory. She held candles, 6 of them. Around the bales, Carter raises an eyebrow. 6 candles for 6 souls. Klein nods, voice trembling. She believed the family needed protection. But the next day, the candles were gone, melted into the hay. Reeves folds his arms. Who had access to those candles? They were a rare winter commodity. Klein glances toward the farmhouse. Only Margaret, or someone she trusted to fetch more like that drifter, Berger. Berger's name brings tense glances among the gathered. Frau Koch, clutching her scarf, offers her account next. "I loaned Margaret a bundle of beeswax candles 2 weeks before," she says softly. "She asked me to return them by January 13th, but I never saw her again until after the news." Reeves nods. "You kept the candles for nearly a month?" She shrugs. "I thought she'd come when she could. With rationing, candles were precious." Friedrich Keller steps forward. His cold dark face is pinched with fear. "I worked the barn's lower stalls on January 13th. I heard scuffling above, like cloth dragged over wood. Lanterns moved, but I saw no one. Then a voice, Margaret's, whispering, 'We are safe now.' I thought she rigged a new alarm system, but when I returned at dawn..." He stops, swallowing. The hatch was sealed from above. Reeves exchanges a look with Carter. "The loft hatch was open when I arrived," he says slowly. "Someone left through it." Palmer, now outside examining the barn's exterior, calls Reeves over. "Look at these scorch marks," he says, pointing to a semicircle of burned straw at the loft's edge. Candles were burned here not in line, but in a deliberate pattern. Reeves squints, a symbol. Palmer kneels to brush away snow, a circle broken at the top perhaps representing an open gateway. Back in the parlor, Carter pins the witness statements and crime scene photos to a corkboard. She steps back, surveying the web of clues. 6 victims, 6 candles, 6 prints, 1 broken circle. Reeves addresses the board. Whoever attacked this family used both folklore and precision. They staged the ritual to obscure their true motive, but they left the prints bear only 6. Ending at the haymounds, he taps the image of the footprints. They wanted us to see them, but not to follow them. A message: the killer is already gone beyond reach. Palmer adds, the chemical solvent was used to dissolve blood residue and possibly to erase the ashes from candle wax. That suggests the killer didn't want physical evidence in the barn itself. Carter eyes the torn letter fragment. The debt remains unpaid. Reeves retrieves it from the evidence bag. Edmund accused someone, possibly a banker or local official, of corruption. He wrote to the Home Guard requesting protection. That letter was stolen. Reeves spreads his hands. We have threats, financial ruin, folk curses, and ritualistic staging. But only one line ties it together: the candles. Whoever took them and placed them in the barn had intimate knowledge of the Hawthorne's fears and schedule. He paces the room. We need to identify who knew the family's routines well enough to know about the hymns in the loft, the ledger writing habits, and the candles, and who could access those candles without suspicion. Carter points to the photographs of the evidence tent. The solvent samples match chemicals sold only to industrial suppliers, none in Blackwood Hills. The killer sourced it elsewhere, then brought it here. Reeves nods. That implicates someone with connections beyond the village, perhaps someone in the Home Guard or a supply officer during wartime contracts. He turns toward the window, where the skeletal wheat stubble leans under crusted snow. We're hunting shadows and whispers, but every whisper has a voice behind it. We must find that voice. He gathers the documents and stands, resolve hardening in his eyes. We'll start with the Home Guard registry and trace candle shipments. Then we'll re-interview key suspects Klein, Berger, and the local supply officer, Captain Reeves, no relation, who oversaw wartime goods distribution. One of them orchestrated this massacre, cloaking it in legend to shield the truth. Outside, snow falls again, erasing footprints and candle scorch marks alike. But in Winter Hollow Farm's decaying walls, the clues remain. And in the flicker of that lone lantern at the gate, the investigation burns on. By early March 1942, the investigation into the Winter Hollow massacre had become the talk of county courthouses. From Manchester to London, Detective Inspector Malcolm Reeves and Sergeant Helen Carter had amassed a dossier thick with evidence: stolen candles, ritual staging, muddy footprints, and solvent traces. Now, in the dimly lit courtroom of Blackwoodshire Assizes, the accused stand ready to answer for the deaths of Edmund, Margaret, William, Clara, Alice, and Thomas Hawthorne. 3 defendants sit in the dock: Carl Berger, the drifter with the muddy coat; Gustav Klein, the local blacksmith who first heard the singing in the barn; and Captain Alan Reeves, no relation to the detective, officer in charge of wartime supplies. Each bears the weight of suspicion. Carl appears hollow-eyed and gaunt, his hands folded tensely in his lap. Gustav's broad frame hunched, soot-stained fingers rubbing a worn leather wallet. Captain Reeves sits erect in his Home Guard uniform, the silver braid on his shoulder glinting in the gaslight. Prosecutor Sarah Whitaker rises, her voice steady and firm. She outlines the ritual tableau discovered beneath the hay, the 6 bare footprints leading only inward, and the stagecraft of candles burned in a broken circle. She places particular emphasis on the chemical solvent found at the scene, linking its composition to wartime supplies overseen by Captain Reeves. Her final words ring through the hall. This was no summoning of spirits. This was murder meticulously planned, hiding behind superstition to mask a very human motive. Defense counsel George Montague stands to respond on behalf of Carl Berger. His tone is compassionate. My client sought only refuge. He had no knowledge of Winter Hollow's dark past. He left at his own accord and returned only upon learning of the tragedy. His boots were muddy from the road, not from complicity. He gestures to the jury. Justice demands proof beyond shadow and rumor. Counsel Josephine Adler, representing Gustav Klein, speaks next. Mr. Klein provided testimony because he cared for his neighbors. He alerted authorities. To accuse him is to punish the vigilant. His knowledge of local songs and ritual rose from childhood stories, not murderous intent. She glances toward Gustav, who nods. Finally, Colonel Edmund Hamilton stands for Captain Reeves. My client managed supplies for the Home Guard with integrity. The solvent connected to his unit was stored under lock and key. He has no motive, no quarrel with the Hawthorne family, no personal grievance. He served his country with honor. Chief among witnesses is Dr. Philip Palmer, the forensic pathologist. He describes the precise nature of the wounds and the staging of the scene. When asked about the solvent, he holds up a chemical report. These solvents match Formula X-189, requisitioned only by military supply depots. They were not available through civilian channels. He names the ordnance stores overseen by Captain Reeves. Gasps ripple through the courtroom as Reeves's uniformed figure tightens imperceptibly. Sergeant Helen Carter then presents photographic exhibits of the candle scorch marks and the sole footprints. She directs the jury's attention to a diagram of the burned straw circle and the splayed toe prints indexed as Exhibit C and D. Under oath, she recounts the raid on a storage shed where she found barrels matching the solvent's signature. The shipment order signed by Colonel Hamilton on January 10th, 2 days before the Hawthorne's last ledger entry. Next is Frau Koch, the neighbor who lent the beeswax candles. She testifies, voice trembling, I gave those candles to Margaret in good faith. When she did not return them, I waited, believing she would come. It was only after the tragedy that I realized they were used to stage a ritual. Her eyes fill, and she pauses, gathering herself before adding, I never imagined they would be burning in my neighbor's barn in such horror. Then Gustav Klein takes the stand. His testimony is earnest. He heard music, not murder. He witnessed shadows, not slaughter. He offers an alibi. On January 12th, he was at the forge until midnight preparing horseshoes for returning Home Guard soldiers. Reeves produces the forge's ledger, matching Klein's own signature. Klein's cheeks redden, but he holds firm, insisting the faint notes in the barn were indeed Margaret's hymn. The final witness is Carl Berger. He describes asking for shelter and being denied. When pressed on his whereabouts on the night of January 14th, he names an inn in Barkington, where the innkeeper confirms he stayed until dawn. The prosecution counters with a telegram, dated January 15th, summoning him back to Winter Hollow. Berger's brow furrows as he explains receiving the message, but claims he did not act on it. The court turns on Captain Reeves. Prosecutor Whitaker grills him on the storage of solvents. Colonel, why would your unit's solvent end up at Winter Hollow? Reeves's voice remains calm. I ordered extra supplies for battlefield dressings. The barrels were stored at the depot. Any number could have been pilfered. Under further questioning, he admits that security was lax due to manpower shortages. Adler, representing Klein, raises a photograph, the half-burned note in Margaret's handwriting. You said you found this in the fireplace. Why did your wife Stacy mention selling used papers to a second-hand dealer? Klein's jaw clenches. She said that. I was unaware. Adler presses. She testified she sold Mrs. Hawthorne's ledger to record collectors, unaware of its contents. Klein's shoulders slump as the admission casts doubt on his recollection of events. Montague for Berger re-examines the innkeeper. Discrepancies emerge. The innkeeper's name is scratched out in the register. The ledger entry is in someone else's handwriting. Berger weeps quietly. I cannot prove where I was. He whispers, despair cracking his voice. Prosecutor Whitaker's closing is a crisp summation. We have a stolen supply of solvents. A man with access, the captain who permitted them to go unguarded. We have candles borrowed from a neighbor. A ledger of debts, and the brutal execution of 6 lives under the guise of ritual. The defendant, who oversaw those supplies, bears responsibility for this atrocity. Defense for Berger pleads for mercy. defense for Klein for acquittal, defense for Captain Reeves for honorable service. The courtroom is silent as the jury retires. Hours later, gaslights still flicker as the jury files in. The foreman stands. We find Captain Alan Reeves guilty on 2 counts of accessory to murder, and not guilty of direct homicide. We find Gustav Klein and Carl Berger not guilty on all counts. A collective gasp rises. Reeves, paladin uniform, is led away. Klein weeps with relief. Berger slumps in his seat. Detective Inspector Malcolm Reeves, sitting in the public gallery, closes his notebook. Despite the verdict, he knows the truth is incomplete. Captain Reeves's conviction for accessory acknowledge is negligence, but the identity of the killer remains unconfirmed. Reeves stands, resolve hardening. The trial has unveiled corruption and staged ritual, but it has not answered the final question: who wielded the hammer and made the first cut? Outside, snow falls silently on Blackwoodshires stone facades. Justice has been served in part, but Winter Hollow Farm's secret lurks on, hidden beneath layers of straw and deceit. The shadows have shifted. The investigation must continue. Detective Inspector Malcolm Reeves returns to Winter Hollow Farm one last time. As March light slants across frost-lined fields, the once crumbling farmhouse now stands under tarps and scaffolding, a temporary monument to 6 lives ended in a single night of horror. The bitter wind carries the echo of falling snow, stirring memories of the massacre he has hunted for months. Tonight, he will close the case at least outwardly and finally lay the Hawthorne tragedy to rest. Reeves crosses the yard, boots crunching in thin snow. The barn, sealed since the trial, creaks in the wind. He presses the building's outer wall and listens. No movement, only the sigh of timber settling. Above, the loft hatch remains bolted from the inside, a silent testament to the killer's escape. Reeves retrieves a master key from his coat pocket, unlocks the barn door, and steps into the chill darkness. Inside, the scene is frozen in time. The 6 haymounds have been removed, but the outlines of the straw remain faintly visible on the floor. Reeves shines his torch across the empty space, scanning for overlooked clues. His light sweeps over scratch marks on the floorboard's tiny grooves that form an arc around the perimeter. The pattern matches, in miniature, the broken candle circle discovered before, suggesting the killer returned after the bodies were removed, perhaps to confirm the ritual's completion. Reeves photographs the markings as evidence of one final, clandestine visit. Ahead, the tool rack hangs crooked on the wall. Most implements have been cataloged, but Reeves notices a single slot missing its hammer and incongruity. He steps closer, running a gloved finger along the empty hook. The shape matches the bloodied hammerhead recovered in the trial, a weapon, carefully dismantled and hidden. The practical mind in Reeves speculates the killer disassembled the tool to hamper identification, then stored it off-site, planning to retrieve it later. He makes a note: search all blacksmiths and retired laborers within a 10-mile radius. Exiting the barn, Reeves moves toward the farmhouse's boarded-up windows. He circles the building's western side, where melting snow reveals trampled paths. Fresh boot prints this time lead to the garden shed. Reeves follows them, heart pounding as they disappear beneath the shed's overhanging roof. Inside, he discovers clay pots and gardening tools scattered across the earthen floor. Under a pile of emptied fertilizer sacks, he uncovers a battered leather satchel. He kneels and unbuckles it. Inside are yellowed pages, Margaret's missing shopping list, now stained and brittle, and tucked beneath the list, a small leather-bound journal not previously found. Reeves opens the journal carefully. The entries begin benignly, noting weather and livestock, but gradually shift to protective incantations spoken aloud by Margaret after reading the old curse letter. On January 12th, she writes of 6 candles in a broken circle, and on January 13th, she scribbles frantically. They came for the debt, an unpaid promise must be satisfied in blood. The final entry, dated January 14th at 8:15 p.m., reads simply, I hear him calling my children's names. Reeves closes the journal with a soft click, mind racing. The entries confirm Margaret anticipated a ritual, but whom did she fear? He rises and pockets the journal. knowing it ties the killings to a calculated plan, not random malice. Yet it still doesn't name the killer. He loads the items into evidence bags and pockets the satchel. As he stands, the wind whistles through the broken panes of the shed's window. A noise behind him, metal scraping, makes him whirl. A figure slips through the gloom at the edge of the property. Reeves calls out, "Hold it right there." The silhouette halts and raises bare hands. It is Gustav Klein, the blacksmith, soot-streaked and trembling. Klein's voice quavers, I came to return what I took." He steps forward, pulling a burlap sack from beneath his coat. Inside lies the pegged and dried handle of a hammer, the missing grip piece. Reeves flashes his torch. The grain pattern matches the head from the trial. Klein's broad shoulders slump. Reeves speaks gently but firmly. "Mr. Klein, I'm placing you under arrest for concealing evidence. Talk to me." Klein's gaze shifts to the barn, then at the satchel in Reeves's hands. Tears mix with soot on his cheeks. "I loved that family," he chokes. "I tried to protect them." He kneels, voice cracking. "On the night they died, I saw a figure moving through the loft, dragging bodies beneath the hay. I ran to fetch more candles, to create a circle of safety, but when I returned, the loft hatch was latched. I heard whispers. I saw those prints, and I was too late." He lifts trembling arms. "I hid the handle in shame. I tried to undo my failure, but I was complicit." Reeves regards him quietly. Klein's confession is a confession of concealment, not of murder. Yet it reveals a witness too afraid to step forward until now. Reeves radios for backup and cuffs Klein gently but unyieldingly. As the call for transport echoes across the fields, Reeves stands alone before the barn, lantern light fading in the twilight. He pulls the journal from his coat, flipping to the final entry again. A chill moves through him. The last line, "I hear him calling my children's names," suggests Margaret believed in an external force, someone who knew her family's daily rhythms, her rituals, her fears. Back at police headquarters, Reeves lays out the new evidence: Klein's buried hammer handle, Margaret's journal, and the scratch marks in the barn pointing to a final return. Each piece converges on one conclusion: the killer was someone intimately familiar with both the Hawthorne's hardships and their protective rights, someone who feared exposure more than anything. Reeves drafts his final report. He names the killer as an unnamed local who, burdened by a promised debt, to Edmund Hawthorne's anonymous correspondence, likely a corrupt official, using wartime rationing as extortion, chose to enact a ritual murder to silence the family and obscure his motive behind supernatural pretext. With Klein as a belated witness, the case reaches its close. The guilty never stood trial for homicide, but justice is served through the weight of concealed evidence and the unraveling of the plan. Months later, Winter Hollow Farm is sealed forever. A simple plaque lists the Hawthorne family's names. Visitors leave candles and flowers in memory. The barn remains fenced off its hatch, permanently bolted, its boards weathered to gray. Locals speak of faint guitar-like hymns on winter nights and small boot prints appearing in fresh snow, so attributed to Klein's gill tract, spirit, or Margaret's protective watch. Detective Inspector Reeves visits once more in spring. Snowdrops bloom along the shed's threshold. Pale green shoots push through thawing earth. Reeves places a single beeswax candle on the ground, lighting it in Margaret's honor. As its flame steadies in the gentle wind, he offers a silent vow: no secret will remain buried on his watch. He turns away from Winter Hollow Farm, its dark history finally laid bare. In his pocket, he carries Margaret's journal, her voice preserved, and in his heart, the sobering knowledge that the line between belief and deception, between ritual and revenge, is as fragile as a single footprint in the snow. Thank you for following this series. Be cautious when you chase shadows. Sometimes it's the footprints you leave behind that reveal the darkest truths.